Welcome to the GAF1 Power Rankings, looking at the driver power rankings after every week's Grand Prix. 10 drivers will make these power ranking lists. They're not standings. They're just an effort to look at who's trending based on the most recent Grand Prix. Come with me as I run through this week's power rankings. Welcome back to my channel, GAF1. I am Greg Allen. And we are just about cruising right into Istanbul for the Turkish Grand Prix on the weekend. Before we get there, though, we need to get to my power rankings. And a pretty interesting power rankings are going to be. A little bit of shake-up after what played out in our last Grand Prix. As always, I'll start with my cut line drivers who either just dropped out of my power rankings, just missed my power rankings, or did something noteworthy that I felt they should at least be on my board so I could talk about them. First up, Esteban Ocon. And the Renault driver, the Frenchman, drops off my power rankings this week. Not totally his fault. He has a little bit of an issue with his gearbox in the last Grand Prix. Nothing he can do about it, but it's an early retirement for him. That actually sets up some pretty big drama there, allowing Lewis Hamilton, of course, to be able to pit under the virtual safety car. Either way, not a good weekend for him. Once again, a comparison to his teammate, who has a fantastic weekend in Renault, so he drops out of my power rankings. Lando Norris, he's been kind of hovering out there. I removed him from my power rankings 1 week ago, as much as it pains me as a McLaren fan. He has a pretty okay Grand Prix, finishes 8th, but not enough, in my opinion, to get him up onto that board. I felt other drivers had a little bit more impressive of a Grand Prix than Norris did. Lando Norris had some adversity to go through in that last Grand Prix. I'd like to see a little more consistency out of him, though. The second half of this season has not gone nearly as well for him as the first half did, so he'll be looking to build on that momentum with 4 Grand Prix to go. And finally, Antonio Giovinazzi, he has to be on this board. I did a whole video that you can find on my channel about Alfa Romeo and how I think they're going to be setting themselves up for a really solid 2021. Their 2 drivers are set for the year for 2021, and I think both him and Kimi Räikkönen have done a fantastic job in getting a little bit more consistent and a little more out of those cars headed into next season. So Giovinazzi finishes in the points again, having an okay season with the power units they had. With that in mind, though, let's get into number 10 on my power rankings. Coming in at number 10 this week is Danny Kvyat, and I'll be very honest with you, I did not expect to have him on my power rankings all season long. He is probably the odd man out in the Red Bull organization. I don't think he's going to be in a Formula 1 seat next year. I don't believe he'll be in AlphaTauri next year. That said, he has a fantastic Grand Prix. It's the second or third time this year he's had a pretty good Grand Prix. But when you just miss out on the podium like that, a 4th place finish, definitely need to give him credit. And where credit is due, I should say. Really, really good run. AlphaTauri looked fantastic all weekend long. Both cars had a lot of speed. Obviously, Pierre Gasly has his issues. Kvyat picks up from where Gasly left off, though. And they were very close to getting a podium for both of their drivers this year. Really great job for him. Probably the only time he makes my power rankings. I know that he was on my cut line 1 week, I believe. Probably the only time he's going to get on there. But finishing the points, 4th place, good enough to get you in the top 10. Let's move on, though. Coming in at number 9, Kimi Räikkönen, who's having a very good end of the year. Again, like Giovinazzi, I did a video on Alfa Romeo just a few days ago and talking about how well they look going into the 2021 season. Kimi Räikkönen has a really good day, finishing in 9th. In the last Grand Prix, he's starting to finish in the points more consistently. He's starting to be in that conversation of getting in the points pretty much every week now. The end of this season, the second half of this season, has looked a lot better for Alfa Romeo as a team than the first half did. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of these teams with those Ferrari power units are starting to really figure it out. And Kimi Räikkönen is definitely leading the way at Alfa Romeo. I'm very impressed with what they're doing there. Räikkönen looks as competitive now as he's ever looked. If he was in faster equipment, I truly believe that Kimi Räikkönen would be battling for podiums week in and week out. Regardless, if Alfa Romeo can get a little more speed out of their Ferrari power units next year, I think they're headed in a really good direction. Kimi Räikkönen, number 9 for me. Alright, 8th place for me, a driver I didn't move up, I didn't move down. Maybe a little harsh, but Valtteri Bottas for me is going to stay in 8th place. Has another good weekend. I mean, he finished 2nd, but the reason why I'm not moving Valtteri Bottas up, and I talked about it in my last power rankings, the expectations for Valtteri Bottas is battle for a championship. And I don't feel like he's done enough to really warrant being right underneath Lewis Hamilton on this power ranking list. As a team, what he's doing for Mercedes is exactly what they want their number 2 driver and Bottas to be doing. But for him as a driver, every week I keep looking and saying, hey, is this the week that Valtteri really breaks out and takes that next step and convinces me that he could ever be a championship driver while running at the same team as Lewis Hamilton? And every week I come away feeling a little bit disappointed. He gets a little bit lucky with issues that happened to Max Verstappen. It promotes him a spot that he probably would not have had. I think he would have had another week where he was finishing third there. Overall, in the Mercedes equipment, I just wanted to see that gap closed, and the second half of this season has not gone well for Valtteri Bottas. Every time it looks like he takes a step forward, to me, he takes 2 steps backwards in his personal goals. As a teammate, overall, Mercedes, I think he's killing it. He did exactly what Mercedes wanted to do. They locked up the Constructors' Championship, but from an individual competitor standpoint, I just feel like he really missed a lot of good opportunities this season to close that gap to Lewis Hamilton and maybe give himself a chance to win a driver championship, and a chance that I think is kind of moving away from him in his career at this point. I don't believe he'll be in a Mercedes after next season. He's got the contract for next year. I'm just concerned with what I've seen this year that next year is going to be more of the same, assuming Lewis Hamilton resigns with Mercedes. So, Bottas, 8th place. All right, let's try this one again. Mechanical issue on the camera, and that's why this video is coming out on a Friday rather than a Thursday like it normally would. It took me about a 24-hour period to fix the camera. I apologize for the weird edit. That's why I'm dressed differently. Where did we leave off, though, in the power rankings that I was going through one day ago? Number 7, Carlos Sainz, the McLaren driver who has had a bit of an up and down middle part of the season. One race he would have a good race, the next race a DNF retirement. Seems to be getting that consistency now back, something I'm really happy to see. I think he's going to have a strong end of the season. That's what McLaren needs, right? They had a very good start to the beginning of the year, and it looked like they were going to easily be in that 3rd, 4th in the Constructors. Things haven't gone that way the rest of the season. Lando Norris has struggled. Carlos Sainz struggled in the middle part of the season. He's starting to see that consistency now, where he's finishing the points more frequently. He's kind of approaching that 5th through 8th place almost on a weekly basis now. McLaren's going to see him do that the rest of the year, preparing that seat for Daniel Ricciardo, and as Carlos Sainz wants to prepare himself for a move to Ferrari. A move that I think he'll be okay in. Maybe not as much next year, but definitely in 2022. But either way, I've always been a big fan of Carlos. I'm sad to see him leave McLaren, but he's starting to get that really good consistency that you want to see out of him. All right, coming in at 6th place for me, my driver of the year so far in 2020, Pierre Gasly and the AlphaTauri. Has a pretty rough Grand Prix in his last outing. Coolant leak unfortunately forces him to retire. It was very sad to see. He had a very, very fast car. We saw where his teammate Kvyat finished, and I think Pierre Gasly was in a position to be a little bit better than Kvyat was. So, a missed opportunity for Pierre. I think another really good opportunity that he could have maybe finished on the podium in that race had that not happened. Mechanical issues do happen from time to time, and the good news for Pierre Gasly is that his performances the rest of this season have more than made up for any possible negative outcome that would happen in the last Grand Prix. He's going to go down as probably one of the best drivers of the season, or at least one of the most favorite drivers of the season and what he's been able to do. 4 more races left to see what's going to happen. He'll be at AlphaTauri next year. We already know that, so that's huge news for him. The big question is, who will his teammate be? Will it maybe be Alex Albon, or will it maybe be a young F2 or F3 driver coming up? Be very interesting to see what happens at AlphaTauri in 2021. Nonetheless, I dropped Pierre Gasly a few spots because of that probably unfairly. It's just that some other drivers did some fantastic stuff that I felt they deserved to move up. Pierre Gasly could very easily be in the top 5 after this week's Grand Prix in Istanbul. So, Gasly in 6th. All right, coming in 5th for me, that is not a typo or a misspelling. That is actually Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, all the way up to 5th on my power rankings. Who would have thought it after what we've seen in the beginning part and middle part of this season from Ferrari? But hey, Charles Leclerc is actually having a pretty solid season considering the power units in those Ferraris, and he's starting to see some consistency. I had him all the way up to around 6th, 7th place, my last couple power rankings. He's up to 5th now. Why? He finishes 5th in the last Grand Prix, 5th in points right now, and he's having a super impressive season in a Ferrari that has been terrible this year. And the one really good news, if you're a Ferrari out of all this, is that you definitely have your driver of the future. He looks fantastic, and I really can't say anything bad about him. You got another driver who's going through an awkward divorce, of course, from Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel, but the comparison between these two drivers this year has been night and day. Leclerc's been getting everything out of that car, whereas Vettel has been struggling to finish in the points almost on a weekly basis at this point. I think they're going to be very excited to have Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari next year. It's some new blood, younger blood in that car. Maybe a more similar drive to what Charles Leclerc, someone who's got to prove themselves at Ferrari. And I think that's what you had going on there this season. Whereas the other driver in that seat, obviously, is just waiting for the season to be up so he can move on to his new team. Either way, 5th place for Charles Leclerc. He's 5th in points. I can't understate how impressive that is that he's in 5th place in the driver standings right now. And the fact that he's got a couple podiums this season and has finished up in the points and just looks really good considering how bad the Ferrari is. It's really some fantastic stuff from him. I look forward to him being in a fast car and when Ferrari figures it out in a year or two, because I think we're going to see him in those top 2 or 3 positions a lot more than not going forward. All right, 4th place for me, dropping 1 spot from last week, is Checo Perez. Sergio has a really good Grand Prix, but a really up and down Grand Prix. Some crazy, just an entire crazy Sunday for him, to be honest with you. And I talked about that in the race review, so I won't go into it too much here. The biggest thing here is I drop him almost because of the team, though. A huge missed opportunity for him to have a podium. They should not have boxed towards the end of that race. The tire wear and advantage they were going to get from that was definitely not worth the track position. A lesson learned, a questionable decision, because I felt like by that point in the day, most of the teams had figured that out already. But nonetheless, they box him, and he misses another chance at a podium. Checo has been awesome all season long. He's 6th in points, which is incredible considering he missed 2 races this year. He keeps threatening the podium, and he keeps having fantastic drives at a time where his teammate Lance Stroll, who at one point was in my top 5 in power rankings, is not even making my whiteboard anymore, and there's a reason for that. Racing Point has been such a crazy team this year. I've had all 3 drivers in the top 10 at one point, including Nico Hülkenberg. They have some real great equipment and fast cars. I do have to wonder, though, after watching what happened with Checo in the last Grand Prix, if maybe there's some race strategy issues there, and that's keeping them from taking that next step. Maybe it's not driver. But we'll see what happens. Race strategy issues and Sebastian Vettel are not a good combination. We have found that out this year. So if that continues into next season, Aston Martin Racing could be pretty funny to watch. Hopefully that's not the case. Either way, my biggest thing for Checo, he's had a fantastic season, and he's doing it all while the last few Grand Prix he's known he's not going to be in Racing Point next year. I can't wait to find out what he's going to do next. I certainly hope it's in Formula One, because if anyone is looking at Checo and doesn't think he belongs in Formula One right now, you kind of need your head examined. The guy has been fantastic. He deserves a ride, and I hope he finds a good one for next year. Still waiting to see what happens at Red Bull, but he's got to be a top contender, I would suspect. Checo in 4th place. All right, coming in 3rd place for me. I can't even say it wrong because it's probably the most controversial thing I've done on my whiteboard for this week. Max Verstappen drops back to 3rd. It's a bit harsh. Max Verstappen's the 2nd best driver in Formula One this season, in my opinion. Overall, he has a weird tire blowout. He's on his way to an easy 2nd place, overtakes Bottas, looking in good shape for Red Bull. And then out of nowhere, his tire blows. It takes him out of the last Grand Prix. And maybe a bit harshly, I drop him down to 3rd. This is not actually any commentary on anything Max did. Max has been fantastic this season. He's had a lot of retirements, though. A lot more retirements than I would have liked to have seen. Red Bull's had some mechanical issues. He's gotten caught up in some accidents, now twice, where at the blowout, and obviously at the Tuscan Grand Prix, gets caught up in the mayhem that did occur there. But maybe a few more retirements that Red Bull wants to see happening. And I have him in 3rd now for the first time, pretty much in my power rankings, not in 2nd. And the reason for that is because the driver who I'm going to put in 2nd, I think, has just been so fantastic. It warranted moving up, maybe more so than it warranted Verstappen going down. Max has been great. He needs a better teammate in his 2nd seat. Whether that could be Alex Albon. That's not a knock on Alex Albon, by the way. I don't suspect it will be Alex Albon. But for Verstappen and Red Bull to take that championship step, the 2nd seat needs to be secured. Max can only do so much in that team. And maybe that team's doing too much for Max. There's a lot of debate there. But at the end of the day, next year in 2021, Verstappen and Red Bull need to be looking at trying to win a championship. And I do mean that. They need to be looking at winning a championship moving forward. And I just don't think they can do that as long as they're facing 2 Mercedes to the 1 Red Bull. And that's a problem they got to figure out in the offseason and maybe over these last 4 Grand Prix. I suspect Max will rebound and have another good 4 Grand Prix to finish the year. He could finish in the podium in all 4 of them. Would not surprise me. But number 2 on this power ranking list is the reason why I put him down to 3 this week. Probably only for 1 week, but we'll see. Max has been great. He needs a better teammate in his second seat. Whether that could be Alex Albon. That's not a knock on Alex Albon, by the way. I don't suspect it will be Alex Albon. But for Verstappen and Red Bull to take that championship step, the second seat needs to be secured. Max can only do so much in that team. And maybe that team's doing too much for Max. There's a lot of debate there. But at the end of the day, next year in 2021, Verstappen and Red Bull need to be looking at trying to win a championship. And I do mean that. They need to be looking at winning a championship moving forward. And I just don't think they can do that as long as they're facing 2 Mercedes to the 1 Red Bull. And that's a problem they got to figure out in the offseason and maybe over these last 4 Grand Prix. I suspect Max will rebound and have another good 4 Grand Prix to finish the year. He could finish in the podium in all 4 of them. Would not surprise me. But number 2 on this power ranking list is the reason why I put him down to 3 this week. Probably only for 1 week, but we'll see. All right, and in number 2 on my power rankings, Daniel Ricciardo in the Renault, one of the most fun drivers to watch this season. He gets a second podium, and definitely the Verstappen blowout probably played a role in him getting that podium. Checo pitting probably played a role in that. Pierre Gasly's mechanical issues probably played a role in that. But all of those things combined, Daniel Ricciardo has been awesome this year. Maybe him and Pierre Gasly are the 2 drivers of the year for me. Checo maybe being in that top 3. All 3 of them had fantastic seasons, but Checo, I expected it. These 2 drivers, I kind of expected to struggle in the equipment that they're in, and they haven't. They've been great. Daniel Ricciardo has totally rejuvenated Renault right now, where that separation between those 2 teams, as much as I'm super excited to see him in the McLaren next year, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And I think that if this season had run before these drivers went into silly season this year, I don't know that you would have seen Ricciardo move on to McLaren. That said, I'm really excited about what he was able to get out of that team. As a driver that everyone knew was moving on, to be a leader and work with everyone in Renault and get them running fast and podium twice, something that Renault hasn't done in years. It's really encouraging, and I think maybe he can bring that positivity over to McLaren next year and see if him and Lando Norris can take the same next steps that him and Esteban Ocon took this year. He's leaving a team better than he found it. And I think when you're looking for a great driver, that is definitely the sign that I look for. Daniel Ricciardo came into Renault when they were a mid-pack team, and maybe not even that good of one. And he's leaving them in fantastic shape. And I think that speaks volumes about his character and his ability behind a Formula One wheel. But nonetheless, another great week for Ricciardo. He's just been on such a hot streak over the last 3 or 4 Grand Prix. I felt like he was deserving of being in that number 2 spot. I don't think he's had a better season than Max Verstappen, obviously. But I think over the last few Grand Prix, which is what Power Rankings is all about, he is trending in that direction, and he really needed to move up a few spots. So number 2 for Daniel Ricciardo, which leaves me to number 1, Lewis Hamilton, who in Istanbul can lock up the Drivers' Championship. I think we all think he's going to do that. He's going to win the championship, obviously, this year, but he can do it with 4 races to remain at the Turkish Grand Prix. Obviously, some speculation after what he said in the last Grand Prix about whether or not he was going to continue on in Formula One. I fully suspect that Lewis Hamilton will be in a Mercedes for the next 2 to 5 years. And 5 years sounds maybe like a ton, but there's this thing where I have a feeling he's going to be here for a while. So my personal opinion, at least for another 2 or 3 years, he's going to be in the new car in 2022. He's not going anywhere yet. It's very interesting. He said those comments. It makes for a great news cycle. I don't think Lewis Hamilton's going anywhere, and I do think he's going to win the championship. I can't see anyone beating him right now. He's so good, and his teammate is just the only driver I think that really has the equipment week in and week out to beat him. And Lewis Hamilton has put the exclamation point on that sentence to say that it's not really a competition between these 2 drivers. Maybe Max can have a little bit faster speeds in Istanbul. We don't know. It's going to be another new racetrack. I'm looking forward to it. But Lewis Hamilton, number 1 driver in the power rankings again. Until someone proves me otherwise, he'll keep being on this board at number 1, and I won't leave you in suspense. I'll just have him up there because that's where he belongs. He is the greatest driver in Formula One, according to the stats at this point. If you like this video, please consider giving me a like and a subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Enjoy FP1 and FP2, which, because this is coming out on Friday, may have already happened by the time this posts. But either way, I'll see you on Sunday when I do my race recap. Thank you again for watching.